Hello everybody and welcome to our German Grand Prix preview. We are at round number 11 of the 2018 Formula One World Championship. I'm be flying solo for this episode, so we'll bring you a relatively short preview for the race returning to Germany. So this is the first race in Germany since 2016, so not too long of a break. Germany's kind of been a circuit and a race that's been on and off the F1 calendar, hosted at different tracks in Germany. So it's great to see that we finally got the German Grand Prix back on the calendar, as you know, Germany is probably one of the most popular areas in the entire world when it comes to motorsport, and definitely for Formula One as well. So it should be a good coming home party for Sebastian Vettel and Nico Hülkenberg as well. So good to see F1 back in Germany. We'll start off the show just by bringing you some of F1 news that sort of happened during the week, and then the week prior we had 1 week off after the triple header. So like we mentioned in the previous podcast, I hope you guys enjoyed the triple header because it most likely will not be back for 2019. I think it was just too much for all the teams and logistic to handle. I think great for the fans. I certainly enjoyed it, but I think just too much at the end for the teams and everybody involved in the travel and stuff like that, so they're probably not going to do that anymore. So now some news coming out of Sauber. Antonio Giovinazzi was given the free practice 1 drive for Sauber coming this Friday in Hockenheim. So Giovinazzi has driven for Haas F1. He's also driven for Sauber as well. You guys will probably remember he crashed out quite a few times in those free practice sessions, but he is back. He is the third driver for Ferrari, so that's why he's driving for Sauber and drove for Haas as well, as those cars are Ferrari-powered as well. So he will be given the drive instead of Marcus Ericsson for free practice 1 that goes down on Friday in Hockenheim. The last time he drove a car was during the Barcelona testing. Let me just check. That was back in May. So we completed 2 days of testing at Barcelona, and that was right after the Spanish Grand Prix. And was also for first day was for Sauber, and the second day he tested for Ferrari. So he'll be back in the car in Germany. So news coming out of McLaren, of course, Eric Boullier stepped down or was fired or was politely asked to step down. We're not really sure, but McLaren did make a change in that timing. So that happened I think about a week and a half ago or so. But this was just a couple days ago. Zach Brown, the CEO of McLaren Racing, came out and said that their car this year is actually worse than the car last year in terms of performance. Weaker than last year's car is the exact quote that he used. So, you know, they thought that the switch from McLaren to Renault would give themselves, a lot better shot in terms of performance. And it's kind of actually done the opposite. I mean, they have scored more points than they did last year. And, have had a bit more consistency, I guess, in terms of, they haven't had that many DNFs due to engine issues. But they have been struggling quite mightily, especially in qualifying this year. They have not done well at all in qualifying. And the last couple of races before Britain, they had struggled to score points as well. So not really looking good in McLaren, to be honest with you. The dark days in McLaren, they said recently that it could take between 2 to 10 years for them to figure out their problems and to get back to their championship prowess that, we saw in the early 2000s and, of course, in the 80s and the 90s. So, when you hear that from a team that it might take anywhere from 2 years to 10 years, I mean, even 2 seasons is quite a long time, but you're talking 10, that's not going to be attractive in terms of your driver market. We heard rumors of Daniel Ricciardo getting offered something. If you're Ricciardo and you hear something like that, or any other driver, that's definitely not what you want to hear from any F1 team. So fingers crossed that they can figure something out there, but I think this is going to be a longer process. And just to wrap on McLaren, I think it showed that Honda probably wasn't exactly the whole issue. They're suffering in chassis performance this year. They were never able to figure out their Honda partnership. So, I think there's a lot of internal issues there, and we'll be following a lot on McLaren as the season ends in terms of what Fernando Alonso is going to do as well. So we'll see what happens there. But getting back now to the German Grand Prix, they have added a third DRS zone. So this is actually one of the first previews that we've done that we've known that the third DRS zone is added. Usually we do our podcast, and then a couple days later they announce that there's a third DRS zone, but We have another one for Hockenheim. So we had one, of course, in Britain, and actually the last couple races there was one in Canada as well. So they added a third one in Hockenheim, so you guys can see the track map up on your screens here. So they'll have the DRS zone in 3 different areas. So one along the main straight, one right after from turn 1 to turn 2, and then going from 4 all the way down to the quite lengthy and sort of curvy straight into the hairpin in 6. So you'll have the detection point right at 4, or sorry, you'll have the detection zone right there at 4, as you can see, and then the activation zone a little bit later on in the straight. So they've added a third one again. Charlie Whiting came out earlier in the week and said that, it didn't really help that much for overtaking when referring to the Silverstone Grand Prix. The Grand Prix at Silverstone. So he said that DRS didn't necessarily help aid the overtaking there. So we're seeing it sort of track specific. Some tracks it worked. In Canada, it didn't really work. Adding a third DRS zone. In Austria, it did help a little bit. It's kind of track specific in terms of when it does work and when it doesn't. But they've added another third one here. So we'll see how that plays out into the hands of the top 3 teams. And then tire strategy going into this race. So the Pirelli have chosen to bring the soft yellow sidewall tire, the medium white sidewall tire, and the purple ultra soft sidewall tire. So Pirelli have actually skipped a compound. So usually they would bring, for example, medium, soft, and super soft, but they have skipped a tire, so they go out of order and they bring the ultra soft, soft, and the medium, which I think is actually pretty good. And something I think I would like to see them do more. I think it just gives teams a little bit more variety. They can be a bit more aggressive on something like an ultra soft, and it might not just be a qualifying tire. They can use it in the race as well for a longer stint. And when it comes to Hockenheim, tire stress isn't too bad. It's sort of in the middle in terms of where Pirelli ranks it. They've listed it as a 3, your minimum being 1, and then max being 5. They get about, in terms of their scale, they get about a 3 in terms of asphalt grip. So teams will have some good variety in terms of what they want to do in strategy. And actually, some of the teams here, you can see the selected sets that they've brought. Lewis Hamilton bringing 2 sets of white medium tire, and then 7 sets of ultra soft. So Hamilton, Bottas, Vettel, Raikkonen have all brought, and you can throw Verstappen in there as well. So they've all brought 7 sets of purple ultra soft tires. And then Ricardo being the only one out of the big top 6 to bring 8 sets of the of the ultra soft. Too many tires to try and memorize here. So interesting to see how that strategy will play out. We've seen Mercedes better on the white medium tire this season. But again, we haven't seen F1 racing here at Hockenheim in about a year or 2, so it'll be interesting to see how the tires play out. And as I was just catching up on some of the news, since we had a week off and we weren't really having any races, it was an interesting article on motorsport.com on whether Formula One should cut down their race calendar. So far it's sitting at 21 races, which is tied for the most since 2016. And the Renault Sport Formula One boss, Cyril Abiteboul, he came out and said that, he thinks that the calendar should be shortened. He thinks 21 races are way too much, and that he thinks that they should reduce the calendar to, as little as 15 races. So I've highlighted just a small piece here, and you guys can find this article for yourselves. Like I said, it's on motorsport.com as well. But one of the things here he says is we need to be able to engage with fans, but it has to remain something special. We are already way above what we should be the figure for something special. We need to convey a message of pride, of motivation, of energy. With the calendar that we have now, the enthusiasm is not the same as when we were only traveling 15 times per year. And then he goes on to say if we don't have the energy, it's going to be very difficult to convey that externally. And he said that between 15 and 18 races would massively increase the value. And then other points in the article was that it would be a bit too much on the team and on the staff. He understands the need to sort of make money and to grow the brand, globally, but that is just a bit too much. So it's a very interesting, topic, and we'd like to hear what you guys think in the comments below. So after you're done watching this video, let us know in the comments what you think. Is 21 races too long? is the calendar in Formula One too long anyway, and should we shorten it, or should we even lengthen it? I think as fans, more races the better for us, right? I mean, we really enjoyed that triple header. Having an F1 race every single weekend was just great. And like I said, more races for us would just be fantastic, just because we enjoy watching the sport so much. Now, with that being said, if you're a mechanic, or if you're part of the logistics teams and traveling with these teams, the team bosses, all these guys, it's a lot for them. It's a lot of stress and it's a lot of work. Back-to-back weekends, you're almost going to every single continent on the earth, doing a race. So I understand the concerns that more races would just be too taxing. And I think that there is something in this, that if you were to reduce the calendar, I think 18 races is optimal. I think that would honestly be the optimal race. I think 15 would just be a little too short, because you would have to cut out a lot of good tracks there. Now, there's some tracks on the current calendar that you could arguably take out, in terms of overtaking abilities and in terms of just excitement. Abu Dhabi, for example, could be one that you could take off the calendar. But then again, there's a big market, in the UAE as well. That's a new market for F1 that they're trying to expand to. There's tracks like Baku that you definitely want to keep on the calendar. So there'd be a big question there in terms of which races would you get rid of, and then which ones would you keep. And that's a tough call to make. But if you were to shorten it to, 17 to 18 races, I understand his point that, it would be more exciting because there is less of it, so you want to make sure that you tune in. With 21 races, yeah, maybe you could skip a couple races and just, tune in a bit later. But with less races, I can understand the point that, okay, that could improve the brand a little bit more. Teams they wouldn't be so, drained maybe mentally or physically with all the travel, so they can maybe, perform a little bit better. I'm not sure. But I think it's definitely an interesting conversation to have. I'm all for kind of getting rid of some of the tracks on the calendar right now that haven't really provided us with some great races. And, keeping tracks like, Baku and Austria is a great track, obviously Monaco, Canada. So we'll see what happens. But, I think they're trying to expand into the United States as well, adding a race potentially in Miami. Other locations have been talked about too. So it almost looks like Formula One is going to adding more races instead of losing races. But we never know. The German Grand Prix has been one that we've mentioned before that has been on and off the calendar as well. Silverstone, we're not sure if they're going to, renew and continue the contract. So that remains to be seen what's going to happen. But I think F1 is in the business of making money, and, the more races that you have, the more money that you can make. So I think that's where they're going to go to. But honestly, I would agree that maybe 18, 19 races would sort of be ideal. And if we could add more teams and more drivers, I think that would make it better, honestly. If we had more teams, more drivers, and the same amount of races, I think the sport could be even more exciting. So it's up for debate. We'd love to hear what you think, though. So make sure you comment after you're done watching this video what you think. Less races or more races in Formula One? That's a good topic for argument. So just a couple quick notes before we get into our predictions. Some of the key overtaking areas, if you guys can see the track map if I can get that right at least once today. Track map up here. Some of the key overtaking areas. So turn 2. So you could be aided by DRS after that one on the straight as well. So there's just that little right-handed kink after the start-finish line. So turn 2, that's one of the best areas for overtaking on this track. And definitely, I think the best overtaking area on this track, without a doubt, is definitely turn 6 at the hairpin. We saw Hamilton get by, I think it was Ricciardo and I believe Raikkonen in 2014. He passed both guys on that corner as well. So heavy braking zone. So that's where you can see our boy Danny Rick maybe licking the stamp and sending it into that corner. A lot of these cars will be carrying a lot of speed into turn 6, that hairpin, a lot more than they were, I think, in 2016, and especially being aided by DRS should help for sure. Which is one of the reasons why I think Red Bull might struggle a little bit on this track, as they're a little bit down on power with the Renault engine. DRS should help them just a little bit, but you're kind of looking at that one sort of long loopy straight, and then another 2 shorter straights, which kind of Red Bull doesn't really like. So those are one of the areas. And then you could maybe say possibly turn 8, which is a little bit difficult because that's pretty tight. and then maybe turn 12 is just sort of in that stadium section, depending on how brave you are, but we'll see what happens. So those are sort of the overtaking areas that you guys should be looking out for during the weekend. And then getting into predictions, of course, I'm just by myself this week, but I got Tyler's predictions. Tyler is going for the race, he's going for P1 Sebastian Vettel, P2 Daniel Ricciardo, and Lewis Hamilton to round out his podium on P3. And he's saying that his surprise of the race is Nico Hülkenberg. Now, I didn't ask whether that was a positive surprise or negative surprise, but we'll see to find out. It is Hülkenberg's home race, so we'll see what the Renault driver can perform. For me, I predicted Sebastian Vettel will get pole, and he will get the win. So Vettel P1, I think Lewis Hamilton P2, and Daniel Ricciardo in P3. I think Ricciardo has had a pretty rough stretch here in the last couple of races, especially during the triple header. So I think this will be a bounce-back week for him. He really needs one for sure, too. You know, the contract talks sort of have calmed down a little bit, you know, since he's been struggling. Most likely looking like he's back with Red Bull anyway. So I'm going to go with Ricciardo. Definitely I wouldn't say definitely because you never know, but I'll go Ricciardo as P3 to round out my podium. And I actually think that we're going to get our first wet race of the season. I actually haven't checked the forecast yet, but I just get some sort of a feeling that we might get some rain in Germany for the race. So that would, I think, be quite exciting because we haven't had a wet race yet this season. So it'd be interesting to see one. It'd be fun to see how these new era cars can perform in the wet. We haven't seen it too often, you know, even dating back to last year. So it'll be interesting to see if we could get a little bit of rain just to spice things up in the race. And then in terms of the championship, Sebastian Vettel ahead by 8 points coming into this. And Lewis Hamilton looking to bounce back after that disappointing race in Silverstone. And we got a lot of comments and opinions on our Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes video. So if you guys haven't seen that, check it out on our channel and chime in with us. So we appreciate all the comments and feedback on that video as well. And that's roughly about it for the German Grand Prix preview. We wanted to keep it pretty short and straightforward for this episode. In the meantime, as always, follow us and subscribe to us on YouTube. Like our videos and definitely comment. We want to hear your thoughts and your opinions and what you have to say about this race and other just F1 in general. So leave your opinions in the comments below. We will not be back actually with the German recap show. We'll be taking a little bit of a break just for a week. So we should be back after the Hungarian Grand Prix with our recap show of the Hungarian Grand Prix. So it is a back-to-back weekend before F1 goes on the traditional summer break for about 4 weeks or so. So we will be back then for the Hungarian Grand Prix recap. But in the meantime, check out all of our videos that are up on our YouTube page. We're on Twitter at TBMF1 Show. That's where we post all of our latest videos, all of our news on our episodes, and also F1 fantasy updates. So check out our Twitter for that. We're also on Instagram at TBMF1 Show. So make sure you follow us there on Instagram as well. As always, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Enjoy the German Grand Prix. We finally got F1 back in Germany, so enjoy it. Thanks again.